Well, the Freedom Caucus is going to go hyperbolic. That's their MO. I don't think they should be tied together at all. And that's just, that's sort of political hostage taking, by the Freedom Caucus or what they want to do. You should not tie that to shutting down the government. I mean, that's a lot worse, right? As funding for the border actually is affected by a government shutdown. I know I'm stating the obvious, but you do need adults in a room. And right now, the Freedom Caucus are not the adults in a room. It's going to be those in the middle. It's going to be, I would say center right Republicans, what's left of them, moderate Democrats. They're the people that they're adults in the room. It's not the Freedom Caucus, and to link that is really irresponsible.
Would you describe, sir, Speaker Johnson as an adult in the room?
Not from what I saw with his press conference, no. It's almost like there's no wiggle room for any type of negotiation based on how they have to be. And I know that, right? That's the messaging that you're doing for your district. Speaker Johnson just isn't messaging for his district. He's messaging as the speaker now. So he has to protect those people in those R+8, over districts. But right now, I just don't think he really is serious enough. I don't think he has the gravitas where he has the ability to control the far right. I mean, you already saw Bannon coming out and other far right sort of mouth breathers already coming out and saying, that he's not living up to the standard that they need on the far right or as conservatives or whatever that definition is today. So I think he's going to have a real tough time. I just don't think he has the gravitas to really pull it off unless you got some more sane people that get to it. Again, we need adults in the room here at this point.
Okay, so you don't think Speaker Johnson necessarily will remain Speaker Johnson at the end of these fights, knowing how things went for Kevin McCarthy?
Who knows? Trying to predict Congress is very difficult as somebody who was there. I remember when I was in intelligence training, I had a mentor tell me, like, the only way you can tell the future is after it happens. But I do think he's starting to get exceptional pressure from the far right. And I think that's why you saw what he was doing. You talked about the economy earlier. I thought it was really prescient. I think it was a great point by you. I think with the economy actually starting to improve, they need another issue to splinter in 2024. And that's why you saw that many people at the border. This was just politics. This really had nothing to do with actually getting anything done. This was just them fundraising and trying to get as many people on their side as they can on the far right. That's it.
Okay, so on the subject of politics, I wonder what role you think former President Trump plays in all of these conversations, knowing that Speaker Johnson is a longtime supporter of the former president. He already has endorsed him. Now you have essentially endorsements clean sweeping all of the Republican leadership because Steve Scalise and Tom Emmer both threw their support behind the former president this week. How does he factor in here into a calculus over something like potentially giving Biden a win on border security?
Trump is the elephant in the room. I mean, not to do a horrible pun there, but really, they're actually following the marching orders of Donald Trump. That's all they're doing. They were down there trying to impress their guy at Mar-a-Lago. We have a real issue on the border. We have real security concerns. Somebody who did 20 years, Air Force contracting, NSA, Office of Secretary of Defense, somebody who's a counterterrorism expert, which I am, not only on data, but targeting. I think it's ridiculous, right, that we have a Congress that can't come together about border security in a sane and humane way. So Donald Trump is not sane or humane in any way. So he is the one pushing the message here. And Mike Johnson's just going to be a mouthpiece. And again, it comes down to, if he's just sort of towing the Donald Trump line, he's not in a position to really make deals, have the gravitas, or the capability to do that. I think that's what should scare the American public, is that you still want to have funding. You do not want to tie border security to funding the government. I think that's an irresponsible move. It's not fair to all Americans, and it's not fair to CBP, to be honest with you.
Okay, so you mentioned the American public, which brings me to another question that also pertains to your intelligence experience and the way that was used in assisting the work of the January 6th committee. Because, Congressman, we are approaching the third anniversary of January 6th. It's this weekend. Obviously, we all know what happened on that day. That day is the subject of many legal issues for the former president, but it hasn't necessarily seemed to resonate with his base at all. It hasn't really changed any minds about him. Do you think that January 6th has potency still in the American electorate's view?
Boy, that's a great question, because I think, you always, look at the 3 to 5% in the middle that you can sway one way or another. And I would like to think, I know hope is not a viable course of action, so I hate to use the word hope, but I would like to hope there's 3 to 5% that still think about January 6th and saving democracy, that are going to vote because democracy need to be saved. But when it comes to the base, I would say it's much more than 35%. I know people like to throw that number out. But even here in the 5th District of Virginia, or even when you're looking at what's going on right now, you're looking at the sort of the breathlessness and the hyperbole that's coming out about January 6th. I mean, you just have a new, specials coming out from far right media on the truth of January 6th. I just don't think it reverberates. I think January 6th is actually a real rallying point for most of Trump supporters. I think they bought into the stuff from the Tucker Carlsons and things like that. So I really think the myth and the conspiracy theories are something that's a real advantage for Donald Trump and the Republicans going into 2024. We just have to we have to message to that 3 to 5% in the middle, maybe a little bit more, that we do not want a repeat of January 6th or a president who would allow that type of nonsense and criminal activity to happen. I mean, it's really that simple. Either you're on the side of democracy and you believe that, what happened on January 6th was heinous, or if you think it was just a peaceful gathering gone bad, really, you're already unreachable after 3 years. There's nobody going to change their mind in the next day or two. And there's certainly not going to be anybody change their mind about January 6th before November of 2024.
Finally, Congressman, just in our final minute with you, on the idea of January 6th, Donald Trump asked the Supreme Court to take up the 14th Amendment case, overturn Colorado's ruling. He says in his filing that January 6th was not insurrection and he did not engage in it. And I know you're not a constitutional law expert, but you were enmeshed in the events of that day, what actually happened. Was it insurrection?
It was. Absolutely. When you look at command and control, we don't have to be ensconced in politics or in legal, sort of maneuvering to see that there were people who coordinated that day all the way up to White House staff. And we know that White House staff was involved, or at least texting, with people like the Oath Keepers. That is a fact. We know about phone records. We know the linkages. We know the amount of people that really thought that they were there in a coordinated fashion. We know about the Oath Keepers. We know about, the convictions of seditious conspiracy and the Proud Boys. So it was an insurrection. You just have a guy who wants to win. But again, if a majority of the public, or the majority of the Republicans, believe it wasn't an insurrection, he's going to get those votes.